the great downfalls of our current economic system and why there is such inequality. It has this loop in it that once you're rich, you can use that money to get richer. And then that's just like its own loop. You have money, use money to get more money. And it just keeps going, without self-correcting mechanisms in order to try and break that cycle at some point. That loop ends up just taking over the system and all the resources just get trapped in that loop.
When you have the wrong idea of which direction you should go within the system, the way to go to point B, south. If I start going north, it doesn't matter how fast my car is. It doesn't matter if I take it to the mechanic, it does all the latest service. I'm going towards the wrong direction.
If you want to understand the behavior of the system, look at the rules and who has power over them. A lot of companies invest a lot of money in lobbying politicians. So then when there is a policy change, which is a change of the rules of the system that the companies have to play within, they can change the rules to increase their profits and increase their ability to manipulate the system.
Paradigms. It seems that it's helpful for us to view the world through a paradigm, but then we can see that there's moments where the paradigm breaks. The evolution of quantum mechanics, quantum physics, broke the previous paradigm. There's a certain amount of assumptions in this paradigm that helps me do some work, but I think it's really important that we understand that this lens might break and is not perfect. Otherwise, we're bound to be victims of our own ideology. He says at the moment you think you've escaped an ideology, you're most susceptible to be part of it.
Who does and who does not have access to information? A public entity published all the pollution levels of a lot of big companies and kept publishing the amount of pollution that they produce. Almost all of these companies significantly reduced their level of pollution without any policy change.
Both of us can summarize the book in a sentence. What?
Hey guys, what's up? Today's podcast, we're going to be talking about Thinking in Systems by Donella Meadows. Yeah, interesting book. I think it was, so she is a systems researcher primarily. And I think she actually wrote it quite a bit before it was published, because many of the examples that are used in it are from like the 70s and 80s in terms of economic systems and the types of geopolitical examples that she uses, but then it was actually published sometime in the last sort of decade or so. But yeah, really interesting book. I very much enjoyed it.
I think it was one of my favorite books we've done so far.
Yeah. Very short, so easy to get through. And although it had like a strong kind of academic framing in terms of, you know, its approach to the issue, it wasn't necessarily dense or overly complicated. It was very accessible.
I think she did a good job starting quite generally and explaining the basic terminology, stocks, inflows, outflows, and then getting into specific examples. By the way, guys, me and Finn created a system ourselves.
Well, we attempted to.
Yeah, really small system. So do you want to talk about that?
So I mean, just to give a bit of preference, in case you hadn't, the idea of a system is just like being able to map all the influences of any type of system. It could be like the simple example they use in the book is just a bath. So you've got, you know, the stock is like the water level, And then you've got the inflow, which is the water coming out of the tap, and then the outflow, which is the water coming out of the plug. Yeah. So depending on the rate of inflow and how much is going out the outflow, will cause the stock level, the water level, to increase or decrease. Now, you can then export that concept of a system to very much more complicated world models, economic systems, geopolitical systems, sort of business, internal business, different businesses working together, and yeah, environmental. A lot of really useful environmental systems actually that have informed a lot about best ways to reduce our carbon footprints, or like the effects of pollution on different aspects of environment. So yeah, I mean, there's many different ways to apply this type of system thinking, where you're obviously, with a bath, it's super simple. You've got like one input and one output, essentially, one inflow, one outflow, and one variable of, the water level. But we looked at a couple when we were trying to do ours, that was, had hundreds and hundreds of different inflows, many different like vectors, and like, ways that different factors would multiply effects of different other things. And the models are incredibly complicated, but it's a really interesting way to basically kind of like, I guess, create a simulation to some extent of a system. And then once you've got this basic simulation that is never going to be 100% accurate, but if it's accurate enough that it gives a good indication of what would happen given a certain scenario, you can then adjust all the variables. You can say, okay, if I turn up this input and then turn down this output, after 10 years, what does the system look like? What happens? And when we're looking to solve complex issues in the world, having good simulations in which you can explore those ideas and just like turn up and down these variables, just see what happens, gives you a better understanding of what we should be aiming towards, and like how we can achieve where we want to go.
So me and Finn modeled like how good you are at jiu-jitsu. We put as inflows, so things that will increase your skill level. Autism, we put steroids. We put
Shout out Craig Jones.
we put we put your mat time, obviously, and having no job. And then as outflows, we put injuries, we put family,
Yeah, dating.
yeah, all these things. Obviously, it's a bit of a comedic system to make with a lot of elements of truth, to be honest. What's interesting also, we have non-fixed variables like rest,
Yeah,
because
that change, like,
too little rest. Well, I don't love much rest myself, but I do do light jiu-jitsu days. So too little rest might get you injured. It might decrease your mat time, and then it's going to decrease your skill level. And so this is really interesting because we can see how they're all interconnected, and some individual elements are bidirectional, like are interconnected in a bidirectional manner, and some are not. For instance, we had the example with steroids and your mat time, and because sometimes it might increase your rate of recovery, you can train more, or take the wrong shit or something, mess up your body.
yeah. And also, yeah, like, if you're increasing mat time, then therefore you're also potentially increasing your risk of injury,
Correct.
which would then feed back into a negative. It has, some of the positive inputs can then lead back to actually having negative outflows as well, depending on the amount, to what level you get it to.
Correct. And so, I mean, we try to simulate our system and see the results. So how would it, let's say we put some values in all the elements, how fast is Chrome going to become good over the years? We didn't get the best graph. Then our graph went like
Yeah,
the
kind of.
wrong UV gain. So it wasn't a very representative graph. Well, it was really fun, and it made the things of the book make more sense.
Yeah, and it also highlighted also the difficulties of actually accurately modeling. like there's so many intricacies, and in order to capture all the intricacies is difficult. I think you need good mathematical understanding, and I guess good coding sort of understanding as well, to really kind of instantiate what you are thinking and what actually into the simulation.
And also, I lost my train of thought, but what was I going to say?
But yeah, I mean, it was it it highlighted the difficulty of it, but then also it highlighted the types of terms, like what was actually important. So
I remember what I was going to say. Don't do that. By the way, me and Finn have both 3 hours of sleep, so I'm quite sleepy. Yeah. So what made me what was interesting is that I had difficulty interpreting the results of our system, and I mean, big part of it is we've created it with a lot of the wrong elements.
Yeah.
And wrong interconnections, but
yeah, and also we put all we put the right inputs in, right, but then the way that they actually influenced the overall inflow of improvement, like we just did add,
yes,
that's not necessarily accurate, and in order to more accurately model that, we would have had to have maybe had a slightly more intricate and complex mathematical system to
yeah. Well, it was really interesting to me that we had difficulty interpreting the thing we ourselves made. It's like it grew out of our understanding. So
yeah,
that was really
and
interesting.
there's certain, and also what I found interesting was the power, and I think we'll maybe come to this later on as well, but the power of loops within the system.
I was going to.
Because there was a few times where if you created some sort of there's certain factors that are kind of like a recurring loop, where one thing adds to another thing, which then ends up adding back to that same thing, and it creates this kind of cyclical system, then the whole system just ends up going exponential in a completely different way, so quickly. And I think, I mean, the book talks about this to a great extent, for example, in economics, and one of the I think the great downfalls of our current economic system, and why there is such inequality and a lot of issues currently geopolitically, is that our economic system has this loop in it that once you're rich, you can use that money to get richer, and then that's just its own loop, have money, use money to get more money, and it just keeps going, and then that just basically, without self-correcting mechanisms in order to try and break that cycle at some point, So whether it be like high taxes on the rich or inheritance taxes or whatever it might be, whatever system, whatever intervention that you might think of, that loop ends up just taking over the system, and all the resources just get trapped in that loop, which is kind of what we're seeing.
100%. That part of the book made me I also really enjoyed it. I mean, just for reference, we have reinforcing feedback loops. We have balancing loops too.
Yeah.
So things that help the system grow and things that don't let it grow out of control, basically. So when it comes to systems and having those loops, let's say, making the rich richer that you mentioned, what other examples can you think where that's the case?
What, like beyond economics?
Yeah.
Hmm.
One thing that comes to mind, a silly example, is you go for a drink. I mean, I don't drink alcohol personally, but then that drinks becomes 2 drinks and then 3 drinks and then 4. It just puts you in just a reinforcing loop.
Yeah, no, it is absolutely true. Like I think, yeah, psychologically, like, but also like breaking an area of discipline in your life. Often, then you're just like, oh well, I've broken this loop. Otherwise, I'll eat. Yeah, like it happens a lot with people with diet. They might be quite strict with their diet, and then they have like one cheat day, and they're like, oh, I ate that donut. Like, I might as well just throw my whole diet out the window, and then they eat something else shit, and then they're like, oh well, I just ate that. I might as well. Today's just going to be a whole, like, I'll just
Yeah.
throw away, and then that
I think
that
one
could
thing,
like
and it's the
cycle
same
back.
with our mind. I mean, it's annoying. Not annoying, but we always come back to the mind and consciousness. But I think there's like a point before the loop begins, and I think it's the same with your mind. Like, you have to catch it before the chaos in your mind begins. And I think
Sort of
the
like
more self-aware we are, the better we are at catching those points. Another thing that interested me, but before I go to that, I think it's good just for us to talk a little bit about why systems are important and what makes this kind of theory different. And it's the fact that there is emphasis in the individual elements, but there's also emphasis in their interconnections. And a lot of the time, to see a system as a whole, to understand the behavior as a whole, you have to try to understand the individual elements and then how they interact between each other. And sometimes we forget that when it comes to academia, when it comes to life in general. I mean, a good example in jiu-jitsu, which is a very niche example, is you have a jiu-jitsu is a martial art. You take people down and then you control them on the ground and you submit them. So you get a single leg takedown and you transition to a double leg takedown. Those are 2 individual elements, but the transition in itself is almost, it's a move in itself that has to be recognized. And I think it's not registered as a move in our heads. We're like, yeah, it's kind of,
So it's just like a transition.
yeah, it's a transition. It's like, okay, the main things are these 2 and that's the in-between thing. That link is as important. And I think that's a big part of what systems thinking brings to the table. And it also allows you to zoom out a little bit and see the bigger picture. I mean, it reminds me a lot of the philosophical arguments, like reductionism versus holism. You have a whole, and then you look at the individual parts of that whole, and you add them up together. And the question is the addition of these individual things larger? Sorry, is
The idea of emergence almost.
so
Is the sum of the parts more than the whole?
yeah, exactly. So the sum of the individual parts, is it bigger than the whole? Fuck, how do we say this?
Yeah, that's
Is
it.
that it?
Yeah.
And so, well, a lot of the time, the answer is yes. I mean, a great example everyone will resonate with is you have a band, you have a piano player, a guitar player, a drummer, and a singer, let's say. So you get everyone alone, they play those things, and then they bring them together, and it creates something more. There's like something more by adding those individual parts together. There's something that's being created. And I think systems thinking is good because it gives us that something more, that knowledge, that
Yeah.
experience.
It also really highlights, I think, particularly in sort of current popular culture, I'm not necessarily saying in academic circles, but it seems like in popular culture, like it's people are very quick to blame like one like news story or like one thing for like many problems, you know, like whether it be like the politician you don't like or, you know, some type of, you know, trend on the internet or like social media. Yeah, exactly. But like it's never one thing. And like highlighting, like when you're actually able to zoom out and really like objectively try and map all the variables.
I don't support what's happening in Palestine, by the way.
Yeah.
So just sound clear, it's a genocide.
I think we can all agree on that.
It's terrible. Sorry, I interrupted you. Just hit me that I should say.
But yeah, I mean, and this is another thing. I mean, I don't know if this is necessarily related, but like, and I think it is related because part of the reason people blame this one thing over the other is this inability to, you know, maintain multiple realities that are at odds with each other potentially, but are affecting the system. So like, for example, we can recognize that there's a massive wave of anti-Semitism on the internet at the moment and just worldwide, and that's not a good thing. But then we can also recognize that Israel is performing a genocide on Palestine. Like those two things shouldn't be at odds, but for some reason saying one kind of suggests that the other isn't true. Like,
It's good.
you know, and it's
I
like,
think it's the lack of systems thinking.
yeah, it is, because it's the, like, people are too quickly to reduce things just to like one core aspect. It's like, no, it is by definition, these systems have just hundreds of inputs, and yeah, some might be extremely influential or much bigger than others, but if you're just focusing on that one thing, you're never going to be able to actually really solve the issue. You have to be able to zoom out and objectively, and you might have a bias towards a certain variable. It might be dear to your heart, or you find it like very emotive, particularly sort of geopolitical type stuff. You know, people become very tribal, and that they get obsessed with this one variable and they think, I need to change this and then everything will change. And it's like that, I think you're potentially limiting yourself when you're trying to change a system, perceiving it in that way.
100%.
You need to be more objective, zoom out, look at all the variables without your bias being attached to them. And then you can have a better idea of like where the different leverage points might lie in order to change. I mean, we'll come on to changing systems, I think, later, but
Another part I found interesting was when you have the wrong idea of which direction you should go within the system. So you think that, a really good example, the way to go to point B, I'm from Cyprus. Let's make this example a bit more tangible. So I live in Nicosia, and if we, let's say I want to go to Larnaca, so that's south. If I start going north, and it doesn't matter how fast my car is, it doesn't matter if I put turbo on it, it doesn't matter if I take it to the mechanic, it does all the latest service. I'm going towards the wrong direction, going north. I'm not going south. I'm going further away from my goal. So I think the importance of, okay, finding where am I going and what tools am I using to go there. For instance, when it comes to the example I gave, use your fucking GPS in that case, and go the other way around. Um, and it's not as easy as it seems for us to find the thing that's going to help us better a system. I mean, and a lot of things in life, doing the right thing, you don't know what the fucking right thing is.
And often, and it was highlighted in the book, they had many examples where like you might do one thing with like good intention to try and change the system, and it ends up just creating some sort of reinforcement loop somewhere else that just like completely fucks the system in a much worse way than.
I mean, there's many examples. You read things, especially with, malicious advertising nowadays. You eat the things you think are good for you. Turns out they're not the best thing for you, especially if you're not very knowledgeable when it comes to your diet. You go to the market, to Sainsbury's, you get this high protein yogurt, and you think you're eating a nice healthy meal, and then it turns out it's full of artificial sweeteners, it's full of sugar, it's full of shit. It's advertised to be healthy. So that's just an example of like, you're thinking you're doing the right thing, you've got the right intentions, and it just takes you further away from you. Okay, that might not be the best example, just because you can't have snacks like that in your diet and still be very healthy. But I think we got our point across. If I can think of another example, I'll say it. What other bits interested you?
I think, I mean, really, like the changing of the system, or like the way to approach, because it's all very well and good mapping the system, and I think that in itself is an interesting process, absolutely, and understanding the mathematics and all that sort of stuff, which I think maybe is slightly beyond me. Although I'm sure maybe if I spent enough time with it, would be able to get it. But it's my current level of understanding, it's definitely a bit beyond me. But as much as that is interesting in itself, I think the main aspect and the reason that we actually chose this book in the first place is we were talking about books and ideas that would other examples, were like Doing Good by William McCaskill, or Doing Good Better, yeah. And then what was the other one that you mentioned? But anyway, the idea was we're looking at ways that we can maximize positive impact, either through work or outreach, or like different, just different community level things, but like what, or much larger sort of global scale type things, like what types of activities, ideas, and sort of concepts are important to actually enact positive change in the world. And so with the systems thinking, mapping a system, but then how do we actually change the system? Because there's many systems in the world right now that I don't think a lot of people are happy with.
And also, when it comes to a system, when it comes to positive impact, there's many things that affect creating something good and making the world be a better place. You can't just focus on one aspect and just expect things to change. But let's talk about the individual first. That's probably an easier example. For instance, when it comes to a human's health, you think of it holistically and think, okay, we've got the physical side, we've got the psychological side, um, um, we've got the social side. Like you have this biopsychosocial model, and you've got to understand all of these aspects and how they connect with each other and their interplay, and to make a healthier human. Yeah, okay, my hands might not be broken and my legs might be okay. Maybe I'll have some psychological issues, or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe I'm quite fine psychologically, but then my hands had broken. That made me socially isolated, and now I'm psychologically feeling a little bit down. So um, it's the same with the world as a whole. I think there's big environmental issues, there's technological destruction possibly in the future, there's the possibility of nuclear war, and these are really big problems. And so it's not enough to see these problems individually. You have to see these problems, what's the interplay? How do these problems connect with each other? And that's really how the destruction might come. But it's also on the other side, and if we flip the coin, if you want to provide something positive, is it's got to come, I guess, you've got to see this as a whole. Because there's a guy from Cyprus, Yannis Laouris. He used to be a scientist. Well, he's a scientist, and he likes systems thinking. And he talks about how he used to spend hours and hours working in the lab, and then something clicked in his head, and he was like, well, this is all well and good. I might discover this new thing in the brain, like, small detail, and publish my research paper, but there might be a nuclear war tomorrow and just, exterminate everyone. So I think the importance of zooming out and looking at the system as a whole. I think also because we are a eusocial species, we will sacrifice ourselves for the benefit of the whole and the community. Like bees will sacrifice themselves for the queen, for the bigger picture. We do some kind of create a system. Let's say I'm an individual part that focuses on healthcare, and you're an individual part that focuses on engineering, and then person C focuses on, let's say, policy. But there's got to be some kind of, that's fine. Like not one person can like tackle every single issue, but there's got to be some kind of connection between those fields, and then that can facilitate change more, which isn't always the case, especially with academia. You study biology, and I study physics, and this guy studies chemistry, and yeah, I mean, there's overlap, some overlap, but I think it could be more.
Absolutely, yeah. I think the over specialization of science is definitely an issue for progress. And like I always find this, like when I read certain authors that do have more of a polymath background, and you see this often all the time, actually, even like, for example, like in neuroscience, where actually a lot of the really successful researchers that come up with,
Interdisciplinary.
yeah, they come from a mixed background. So they might have started in physics and then moved to neuroscience or something like, yeah, along those lines. That's a very common route, physics to neuroscience, for a lot of the top ones. But yeah, like this, like ability to kind of have that more zoomed out picture and that more whole, the sort of gestalt of the whole thing, as Emma Gilchrist talks about, is like absolutely essential to be able to like really have the influential insights that can lead to like massive change. And yeah, that's one of the most difficult things. I think what it is like that's where like the creativity can come in, is like linking things together that aren't normally put together. Like that is like in some ways that process is creativity, that process of drawing concepts together that have never been put together.
Creates innovation.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think of some innovation in, you gave the example like in neuroscience, but sometimes I see it even in medicine. I don't want to feel this might be too big for my uh, I'm not well read enough, but if you see some physicists that were physiologists and the laws they came up with in medicine, they're not that complicated. But having said that, usually if the law is really simple and you're able to prove it, to prove a simple law is sometimes extremely hard because it's simple. But I definitely think that we could have huge innovation in science and in humanities if there was more interdisciplinary conversation. Doesn't even need to be and
Just that, yeah.
so the example like with medicine and let's say Fick's law or Starling's law, should I have Gemini on you so I don't talk out my bum here. If we had more people like that kind of took two routes and tried to see how they intersect. I mean, the great example is What is Life by Schrödinger, like one of my favorites prefaces in a book where he starts saying a lot of the time innovation comes from jumping into a field you don't know a lot about. What is Life is a book on biology by a physicist, one of the best physicists, Schrödinger, and he says sometimes you have to make a fool of yourself and go towards the unknown. And in this book, I'm going to try to make a fool of myself, and it's a very influential, important book. Gemini. So, Fick's law is, whoops. So Fick's law is made by Fix, I guess. Can you talk to us about it? Tell me about what's the maths behind it and what's the background of the guy? Because if we had more guys like this, I think that would only be beneficial.
Fick's law was developed by Adolf Fick, a German physiologist, in 1855. The math behind it describes the process of diffusion, specifically the rate at which a substance moves from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. This mathematical framework is significant in various fields, including biology and chemistry. Is there a particular aspect you'd like to know more about?
What's his background? Did he have a background in physics, or am I thinking of the wrong example here?
Adolf Fick was primarily a physician and physiologist,
Yeah.
while physics.
Wrong example. Give us an example in medicine where we have a physicist that's also a physiologist and came up with a good law.
Another prominent example is Hermann von Helmholtz, who was both a physician and a physicist. He made significant contributions to various fields, including the law of conservation of energy, which has profound implications in medicine and physiology, particularly in biomechanics. Are you interested in the specifics of any of his work?
Also good. What about some chaos theory example like Hodgkin, Huxley, and can you talk to us about that?
The Hodgkin-Huxley model is a significant example, though not directly tied to chaos theory, but crucial in biophysics. Alan Hodgkin and Andrew Huxley developed it in the 1950s, creating a mathematical model that describes how neurons transmit electrical signals. Their work was foundational for understanding neuroscience. Are you interested in the mathematical details?
Is it a non-linear model?
Yes, the Hodgkin-Huxley model is nonlinear, which allows it to capture the complex dynamics of neuronal excitability. The nonlinearity is crucial for replicating action potentials, like the threshold behavior and the propagation of signals.
Cool. Anyway, sorry guys, this was a small parenthesis. I just wanted to throw some examples of interdisciplinary work, but I'm too stupid to do that myself. So I had some assistance.
But yeah, no, I mean, this you see a lot of polymaths back in the day that were, you know, experts across multiple fields, were often like some of the most insightful writers. And I think, yeah, that is the reason. You see, what's the lab? There's like an institute in the US, or I think there's a couple where like they look at like complexity, and it's like
I read the book.
I think Sean Carell is one of he does some. He's at Baltimore, but he also does some work there as well.
Which lab looks at complexity in the US? There's probably
Yeah, but it's like a multidisciplinary, quite a famous institution. And I think Sean Carell does some work there.
Sean Carroll is a professor at Johns Hopkins University and a fractal faculty at the Santa Fe Institute.
Santa Fe Institute, that's it. Sorry, carry on. Explain the Santa Fe Institute and the concept behind it.
The Santa Fe Institute, established in 1984, is a non-profit research institute dedicated to complexity science. Its concept is to foster a multidisciplinary approach to understanding complex systems across various fields, from physics to biology, economics, and sociology. They aim to develop new perspectives and tools to explore these systems. Does that clarify things?
By the way, guys, it's not that we're underplaying the importance of understanding an element in itself. It's just that I think in our society, we've lost, well, we don't put a lot of focus on how these things are how individual elements are interconnected. But it's still important to understand the individual element. For instance, a good example is mixed martial art. Definitely learn jiu-jitsu by itself, definitely learn Muay Thai and kickboxing and boxing and judo by themselves, but then you have to learn how to integrate them together, how these things connect with each other. And you need both the study of the things individually and as a whole, and how they connect to get better. Another thing that's interesting, you mentioned people trying to have a reductionist mindset. And I did think a little bit around, I mean, the book mentions Thomas Kuhn and the structure of scientific revolutions and paradigms, so I think it's good to discuss a little bit around that. But when it comes to grand narratives, viewing the world through a grand narrative, which is usually what postmodernists deny, that there is no grand narrative. She mentions it a little bit in the book. I think having an understanding the world, understanding that the world will be complicated and you perhaps might not be able to create this beautiful unified narrative, I think is really important. It seems like we as humans, she was talking about it in the book too, we have the urge to create these grand narratives, these like, okay, I'm going to reduce these, I'm going to use these universal rules to make my life easier. But at the same time, I think we do realize the complexity of our world and we do appreciate it. And you can see this when, with beautiful architecture, and she mentions a few examples, or beautiful arts, that's quite complex and it's not really symmetrical a lot of the time, or it's quite chaotic in nature and it's quite non-linear. So I think we have these both urges at the same time as humans. Yeah, just some thoughts, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's like the ability to, and often these urges are like paradoxical as well.
Yeah.
Like that things can seem to be opposite, like oppositely opposing each other, but actually both extremely important. And like when you have, and I do think that many of the most kind of the deepest truths that we get out in physics and neuroscience and many things are at their core kind of very paradoxical.
It's like, well, I think, who said it? I don't remember. Like, at the one end, we have a truth, and that's quite profound. And if you go all the way to the other side, to its opposite, we have another profound truth.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and it's very true. I think just going back to the systems thinking and like the ways in which we can change systems. I think this is an important aspect of the book that we should kind of like explore in a little bit more detail. So like there's 12 leverage points that she talked about. And the first of which is actually kind of she kind of ordered them in a way that was like the least to the most effective in terms of how you can actually leverage change in a system. So the least effective would be numbers. So the constraints and parameters such as, for example, in an economic system, subsidies or taxes or even something like minimum wage. And it was noted in the book, we as a society, we often spend like 90% of our time arguing over these numbers, like what's the tax rate, what's the minimum wage, when actually when you look at systems as a whole, like the whole system, and look at it from a systems thinking perspective, you can change those numbers what you want, and it's really not going to have a significant impact on the overall system.
She talked a lot about quality.
Yeah. Which is yeah. I mean, I think I found that quite insightful because it reminds us that maybe a lot of these discussions, I mean, I guess this is kind of maybe a little bit conspiratorial to think, but like, the ones that actually understand and have the power in the system might be like, okay, we'll distract people by making them argue over, what the minimum wage is or the tax rate.
Yeah, she mentioned.
And in fact, even if they win, like the people with power are still going to be in power. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not really going to change anything. So there was a couple other different ones that were interesting. So buffers the size of stabilizing stocks relative to their flows. So a big bathtub with a small drain is more stable than a small one. Increasing a buffer makes a system more stable but less flexible. So yeah, I mean, I don't really understand that much, do you? The buffer one.
Always ask. Buffers, the sizes of stabilizing stocks relative to their flows. A big bathtub with a small drain is more stable. So drain in this case is the outflow. It's where we lose things. Is more stable than a small one. So a small bathtub. Increasing a buffer makes the system more stable but less flexible.
Okay, so it's just the overall size of the system if it has the same outflow.
So can you explain us about buffers? So we have what is more stable? A, a, a big bathtub with a small drain versus a small bathtub. You mentioned it, I think, and we didn't understand.
That's a great question and a perfect way to understand buffers. The key concept is stability and resilience. Think of a buffer as a stock or a reserve that absorbs changes and disturbances.
Yeah.
In the bathtub analogy, the size of the bathtub is the buffer. If you have a big bathtub, a large buffer, it can handle changes in the inflow or outflow much better. For example, if the inflow suddenly increases, the big buffer will absorb it, preventing a quick overflow. In contrast, a small bathtub has a small buffer, so even a slight change in flow can quickly destabilize the system.
So the lesson? What's the lesson we can learn from this?
The core lesson is that buffers create resilience. A system with adequate buffers is more able to withstand shocks, disruptions, and unexpected changes without breaking down. Understanding this is vital in systems thinking because it highlights the importance of redundancy and flexibility.
Could you provide an example of a buffer within an economic system, for example?
A great example of a buffer in an economic system is a nation's foreign currency reserves. These reserves act like the big bathtub. When economic conditions change, such as a sudden drop in export demand or a volatile currency, these reserves can be used to stabilize the economy, preventing a crisis from escalating. Without such buffers, an economy would be much more vulnerable to external shocks.
Okay,
Yeah, makes sense.
I understand that. Um, Another thing that I found interesting, and we'll continue talking about how to make change positive in a system, is adapting to the rules. And this, especially in bureaucratic systems, is quite common. Even in school, um, there's a stupid rule, and we find ways around it. For
Yeah.
instance, you mentioned the example: a company at the end of the year tries to spend the rest of its budget because otherwise they're going to lose it, for instance. And it's a stupid way around the rule, but
Yeah.
I mean, the best fucking example is jiu-jitsu. And in general, many sports where some kind of rules don't make sense, so then you adapt, for instance, guys, some jiu-jitsu competitions like the ADCC trials tell you in the final you need to wrestle. But there's loops. For instance, shoot a single leg, hold it for 3 seconds, and then you can poke out. It kind of loses its point. I mean, okay, yeah, we can say it's sports jiu-jitsu, but if your initial point was, I want to learn how to grapple, um, it's kind of a it's for me it loses its points.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, or like I don't know, say for example, like the points system and like how certain positions are rewarded for
Mhm.
being like, say side control or something like passing. Where like when you actually look at MMA, for example, and that in a kind of like more closer to a street fight situation, side control kind of sucks. Like it's not that effective, compared to say like half guard or something like that, top up.
Well, side control is good, but a good chest to chest
Yeah,
half guy is fucking
is
good.
that you see that being a lot more dominant, particularly amongst the Dagestani
Yeah, you
sort of style.
see the loss.
But that's what I mean. Like in a jiu-jitsu system,
You don't get any points.
you don't get any points for that. But like that is a dominant position. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, and then it kind of loses a little bit of its point. Another thing I wanted to.
but yeah, that was
Sorry, yeah,
rules. Rules is actually number 8 on the list, which is one of the most influential. So, you know, yeah, understanding the incentives, punishments, and constraints. The quote in the book is, if you want to understand the behavior of a system, look at the rules and who has power over them. And yeah, often like the control of the rules is, or the attempts to control the rules of the system is really where like there's such high leverage in changing the system and such high amounts of power. And you see that, talk about this in the book as well, you know, lobbying I mean, it's rife in the US, but it happens everywhere. You know, a lot of companies invest a lot of money in lobbying politicians. So then when there is a policy change, which is a change of the rules of the system that the companies have to play within, they can change the rules to increase their profits and increase their ability to manipulate the system. And yeah, it's I mean, it's obvious, but it's, you know, it's an interesting one.
Well, it gives you a framework. It gives you a framework. A lot of the time, what we need is obvious things pointed. We want obvious things pointed at us, but systematically. Again, this is borderline a jiu-jitsu episode, but Gordon Ryan has amazing jiu-jitsu instructions. John Danaher has amazing jiu-jitsu instructions. There are moves that you don't know, but a huge part of why I find their instructions so helpful is they systematize things you already know as individual elements: an underhook, a whizzer, a crossface, a head block, but they systematize it. And so they show us how these individual elements are connected, which is exactly what we've been talking about today. And that's different scenarios, and they use these tools slightly differently in each scenario. For instance, systematically attacking the back. Okay, which primary arm and secondary arm. Which arm is being controlled by the opponent? Is it the choking arm or the other arm? Is it both his arms that are holding my choking arm? Where is it holding it? Am I in the underhook side or on the overhook? Overhook side. Is my body triangle top body triangle, or is it on the bottom side? And then it changes slightly what you're going to do in each case. But the fact that you've got it all in the system and you understand how all these things connect with each other, and that it means that it's a different outcome, that's literally why they're called, like, they are systematically attacking the bag in this case.
Yeah.
So that's a good example of what we've been talking about.
Yeah, no, I agree. Another one that a couple ones here that actually I found really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
One was delays, which I didn't expect necessarily.
Delays is a really good one.
And basically,
time,
yeah, so the idea being that the length of time relative to the rate of system change. So if the feedback,
losing weight, for instance.
yeah, the feedback for change is delayed to the system, then it can cause like a massive amount of oscillation within the system. So like you're trying to make a change, but like you don't, the results of that change are like much delayed. So it means you can overcompensate, and then like, you know, you might then change the other way and then overcompensate again, because you're not getting the direct kind of instantaneous feedback that is required to error correct and go in the right direction at all times. You know, when you have that delayed feedback, it means that there's going to be times where you've gone too far or you're not gone far enough, but then you don't quite have the understanding of the results.
Yeah,
enough
it takes time. I mean, losing weight, it needs time to. Maybe you're doing everything right, but give it some time, huh? And then you might lose weight. Maybe you've just started smoking weed and everything, and you smoke weed all the time, every day. You might still be feeling great, but give it a few months, there's a good chance you might become a little bit more anxious, a little bit more psychotic. I don't know. Just, I'm not saying everyone that smokes weed is going to experience this, but it's a possibility. Or other delayed things. You know, you started smoking tobacco. Well, you don't know the effect it's going to have on your lungs yet. You might be living a good life, and then eventually it might fuck you up. So yeah, there's a lot of times delay in systems, um, and I think as humans we are very prone to. It's almost a blessing and a curse. It's hard for us to look far in advance sometimes, and we just think of things short term. And it's a weird one because also I think as humans, sometimes we do the opposite too. We just look too far in advance and we're not focusing on the present. So I think you need a good balance when it comes to trying to change a system, on having a long-term vision, understanding how it's going to be short-term, and balancing those two aspects.
Yeah, and I mean that links heavily to one of the other leverage points, which is just information flows in general. And this I think is a really fascinating one. So basically, you know, the structure of who does and who does not have access to information, or having missing feedback. For example, the making it says like making a company's pollution levels public to its neighbors. Oh, okay, this was one of the examples in the book where I think this I'm not entirely sure whether it was a magazine or some type of entity that was a public entity, published all the pollution levels of a lot of big companies. And just because, and it kept publishing their pollution levels, the amount of pollution that they produce as a company, every couple months or annually. And without any policy change, because this publication started to gain traction and there was a lot of people talking about it and had this leaderboard of ranking all the different companies, the worst, the best, all that sort of stuff, without any actual government level oversight, almost all of these companies significantly reduced their level of pollution, because it created this information, this kind of like positive feedback loop in which the sort of marketing of that company, or the public perception of that company, was tainted because of the level of pollution they were.
Well, I mean, it's the system changes based on who has information about the system.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, your wife will definitely treat you very differently if she knows that you, let's say, okay, this is a bad example. Well, not bad, it's kind of like a sad example. Mary and John are married. There's going to be a difference in how they interact with each other once John finds out that Mary cheated on him, for instance. There's going to be a change in the system. I guess in this case, the system is what? The marriage, maybe. It's going to be different. I mean, maybe this is a very simple example. Do you think it's makes sense or no?
What if they stay married or not?
No, it's like so John, well, the system would change once there is a change in who knows what. Like not now that John knows that, let's say, Mary cheats on him, so there's a change in who has the information. There's going to be a difference in the system, which is the marriage. I mean, I think we are I know we are kind of overcomplicating a really simple everyday thing in that case, but I think when you use this way of thinking, you can and scale it up to really complicated things, then that's quite beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's a better example?
It's a good example because like Mary might be cheating on John, but if he doesn't have the information to know that's the case,
system will behave differently.
the system behaves differently than when he does have that information. And it's just like, how can you make change? Like, how can you change the intention or even attempt to understand what the system is doing without proper and complete information about the internal workings of the system and the outputs of the system?
Pause.
Um,
I need to check, otherwise I'm gonna have some audience. So it's every because I always think about that like I would usually do. Okay, sorry, yeah.
And I think that the information thing, actually, I was thinking about this when we were talking about the last podcast you did around and the idea of deepfakes. And
Dr. Matthews, shout out.
Yeah, shout out to the last podcast.
Great guest.
And the fact that, and I think just generally, the information landscape of today is so polluted by just fake information, fake news, and false, deep fakes, whatever it might be, sort of AI slop, but then also just wildly conflicting reports of the same event. We see that, in particularly in the US, across the political aisle, the same event might happen, and the left and the right just have extremely different takes on how it went down and why it went down. And when the information landscape is so polluted as it is, it makes it extremely hard to actually have that zoomed out perspective of the system, because what information are you trusting? Like, how do you trust the information you're getting and then therefore apply that information to the system to try and make changes? So, the understanding what is good quality information is absolutely essential to try and make systemic level changes. And particularly in today's reality, I think it's going to become more and more important as the internet descends into kind of this web 3.0 kind of level of sort of, or dead internet theory kind of level of AI content. It's I don't exactly know what the best way to navigate that issue is, but in terms of how to highlight the valuable information and be able to discard the rest, I mean, you can do it on an individual level by like really trying to look into the sources and understand that. But, as a whole, as a society, how do we do it? It's a difficult question.
I think a big thing is sources.
Yeah.
Which can be oversimplified because then, people use research suggests, card. And like, what research? Is there conflict of interest? Is there how
what
many...
was the statistical models they used? What was their sample size? All this type of stuff.
So leave me alone with fucking research suggestion. Having said that, it's really important to like understand. I'm not saying don't listen to the research. It's not as simple as I think it's not as simple as that. And I've noticed this a little bit, especially with undergraduate students. There is a bit of a blind trust to
the textbook.
And I'm like, it's a hard topic to navigate because I feel like anything I say is like, it comes back to what we were talking about before. First, it doesn't mean that just because I'm saying, it's like just because I'm saying A means I don't mean B. It's like science is a very good tool, but it's not as simple as science says and then job's done. It's like it's more complicated than that. Another part that I found interesting was when she was talking about assumptions, for instance. Not every society used to assume that we can just own land. Like, this is mine and I'm allowed to build things on it. Other societies, like a lot of hunter-gatherers, didn't take that as an assumption. And I think we have to be really careful of our assumptions when it comes to a system, in order to understand why it behaves as it behaves. And if we want to change the system, we need to understand our assumptions within the system. I mean, a system might be your dating life, and you need to do some introspection and think about your core beliefs about yourself, for example, your assumptions about yourself. How do these assumptions affect the system of my dating life, my social relationships in general, my romantic relationships? So these are like important things to think about.
Absolutely. And I think two other ones would be positive and negative feedback loops. So like negative feedback loops is loops that are implemented in the system to kind of like slow the system down. So kind of maybe like a self-correcting mechanism. The example here is like a thermostat or like the predator-prey balance within like a environmental sort of ecology sort of situation. But I mean, I think this kind of links as well to just information in general and what Noah Harari has in Nexus, talking about like the importance of self-correcting mechanisms for the furtherment of like progress and like good information. Having these self-correcting mechanisms in which things are challenged and they have to fight to be proven, they're not just blindly accepted, or they're not just like blindly able to have influence on the system. They have to fight for their right to have the honor to influence the system.
Well, jiu-jitsu, again, it's a good example. Your techniques are much more interesting and valuable to the community if you can hit them in competition than if it's just techniques you try out at the gym on
if you can only do them while you're drilling compared to actually hitting them in a competition.
So the element of resistance in fighting makes us respect that martial arts if we can prove that we can, because it is a self-correcting mechanism. It's like what works and what shit doesn't work.
Yeah.
Let's find out. And science does a really good job unfortunately, I don't know much how good religion, how good of a job religion does, because you can just keep changing the interpretation of the text, and then the text is never wrong.
Yeah.
Which is an issue. I wonder if there's any alternative viewpoints. I know that's Harari's viewpoint, which I just said. I wonder if there's any alternative viewpoints where we can make religion so justice here, but not to think of any.
Yeah, I don't think. I mean, religion is kind of notorious for sticking with a viewpoint, even if there's new information that appears that seems to counter it.
Paradigms. Just as a parenthesis, it seems that it's helpful for us to view the world through a paradigm, but then we can see that there's moments where the paradigm breaks. I mean, the evolution of quantum mechanics, quantum physics, broke the previous paradigm of physics. Yeah, just Gemini is going to do a better job here, so it's good if we put it on. But I think when it comes to paradigms, I think it's good for us to understand that, yeah, it's helpful for us to view the world through a certain lens sometimes, but we need to understand that we are viewing it through a lens, and that lens is not always one-on-one, is not one-on-one to reality. And this reminds me a little bit of like Donald Hoffman's stuff on conscious realism and the analogy of wearing a headset when we view reality. But I think that's really important. Understanding that, yeah, it helps me to view this way. There's a certain amount of assumptions in this paradigm that helps me do some work. But I think it's really important that we understand that we are doing this, and we understand that this lens might break and is not perfect. At least having that kind of realization. Otherwise, we're bound to be victims of our own ideology. And I think when Slavoj Žižek, Slovenian philosopher, criticizes ideology, this is what he criticizes. And he says at the moment you think you are out of an ideology, so you've escaped being trapped by ideology, you're most susceptible to be part of it. So we have to question ourselves. We have to question our beliefs. Yeah.
Yeah, like in fact, the idea of a paradigm shift is like the most, I think, on that leverage point is the most important factor. It's the most influential factor. Is the ability to completely change your perspective on how you think a system could function or should function. Gemini, could you explain to us a little bit more about paradigm shifts as a leverage point to change systems, as talked about in the book? Oh, it froze.
That's good.
Gemini, could you provide a bit more information on how paradigms are, what paradigms are, why they're important, and how they can be used to leverage change in a system?
In Donella Meadows' framework, paradigms are the deepest and most powerful leverage points. What are paradigms? A paradigm is the shared mindset, assumptions, and beliefs that form the foundation of a system and society as a whole. They are the unspoken truths that determine what is considered rational or possible. Examples include the belief that continuous economic growth is always good, or that natural resources are limitless. Why are they important? Paradigms determine the goals, rules, and power structures of the system. They are the ultimate leverage because changing the paradigm can completely transform the entire system, whereas tinkering with parameters or rules will only have marginal effects. Transcending paradigms, the most powerful leverage point, involves questioning these deep-seated beliefs. This can happen through awareness that your mental model isn't reality, exposure from different perspectives and cultures, experimentation, new ways of thinking, and implementing new systems. Ultimately, Meadows suggests dancing with systems by staying humble and always being a learner, allowing yourself to transcend paradigms as needed.
Another topic that I found very interesting was self-organization. I think people are really scared, including me sometimes, to let the system evolve without putting a lot of structure into it and seeing if it's going to organize itself. We are really scared of that. And I think for a system to be successful, like she was saying, it needs to have some diversity. And a lot of the time, when we implement a lot of structure into a system, we kill its diversity.
Yeah. We limit the ability for the system to find its own natural equilibrium and flourish. Yeah.
Well, that's a scary one, because a lot of the time as humans, we do try to do that, and
Yeah.
we end up as drug addicts, we end up as fat. So,
But like they say, like for example, like good information. Like if everyone in the system has enough good information, you don't need those external rule-based self-correcting mechanisms, because the system will automatically self-correct. Do you know what I mean? There is this inherent ability from people, if they are given good and accurate information, that they will just automatically be able to perceive this is heading in the wrong direction and we need to correct it. So yeah, I mean, and sometimes you might put in place some type of attempt of a self-correcting mechanism, but then actually it might not actually work in all situations, which then could cause a problem in itself, or could cause a trap, or could cause some type of rule-based leverage point that bad actors could use to magnify their own benefit while minimizing others.
I mean, think of a small example such as, should I let an injury heal by itself or go to the doctor? A lot of the time, go to the fucking doctor. But sometimes you try to externally create some change to the system that might create other problems. So you give drug A, and then that drug A has a side effect, and then you need to deal with that. Whereas in few situations, maybe you could have been better off with not having that external help, and other times not. Again, I think we should talk a little bit more about self-organization. It's a topic that I find fascinating in general, of how the world came to be too. I'm not well read on it, so we might need some help from AI. But do you know anything else about self-organization?
In what context?
For instance, I don't remember the book. I think it might have been a book on complexity, actually. In how the world came to be and sustain itself.
Yeah, there's it's actually interesting. It kind of makes me think of this sort of conversation I think I heard the Demis Hassabis talking about, with the ability to AI potentially to see these kind of self-organizing structures that make up the foundations of reality. And yeah, it seems that there's almost, with many systems, there's this kind of evolutionary sort of, it's kind of like evolution. Obviously, it is within the animal kingdom and just general plants and everything, but even it can go beyond that. He's suggesting kind of with the laws of physics and like how different, like the reason there are different laws of physics because the system finds equilibrium in certain states. It's because there's kind of been this almost like evolutionary process by which the other states maybe were kind of briefly fluctuated through, and they weren't, they lost out to that stable state which was able to maintain itself and allow other things to happen. And yeah, obviously within the animal kingdom, this kind of the idea of evolution, and which is a positive, negative feedback loop that allows the system to self-correct and over time sort of self-orientate to the most efficient and most productive solution.
And sometimes not. It's such a weird thing that I can't fathom it now. That sometimes things fall into place naturally, and then sometimes letting things fall into place naturally just makes you an addict or something.
Yeah.
It's just like so amazing to me. Like you, and I think ultimately, for me, it seems to me that as a rule of thumb, I try to have a third structure, a third chaos, and a third kind of the in between. And I try to apply that in everything, to jiu-jitsu, to a conversation, to studying, to what I should be studying. I want to ask Gemini something about bounded rationality and unilateral. Hey Gemini, what's unilateral disarmament and negotiable disarmament?
Unilateral disarmament is when a country decides to reduce or eliminate its military capabilities without requiring anything in return from other countries. It's a one-sided action. Negotiable disarmament, on the other hand, involves mutual agreements. It's a process of negotiation where countries agree to disarm together, often through treaties and verifiable measures, with concessions made by all parties.
This is really interesting. What's the example of a big company? I don't remember if it was Apple or someone else, where instead of trying to one up their business opponents, they just did the opposite as a strategy.
One prominent example is Apple under Steve Jobs, particularly during his return. Rather than directly competing with Microsoft and other PC manufacturers in the traditional market, Jobs pursued a strategy of differentiation and innovation. Instead of just making another computer, Apple focused on creating distinct product lines like the iMac, iPod, and iPhone, effectively creating new markets and changing the.
I don't remember the book I read this from, guys, but they basically use unilateral disarmament. I don't know how to pronounce the word. So they did the opposite of what was expected. I mean, you gave us a good example about the defense, but it's similar to like because if you think about it strategically, I was listening to Fidias talk about it, the politician. A lot of the time we think that, okay, what's the path to safety? Is it, let's say I'm a country, I'm worried about my neighbors invading me. Let's say option one is, let's pick a bigger army, let's build a bigger army. But if you think about it for a second, yeah, that might be the best option, but it might also not be, because that creates a loop where, okay, the other country says, okay, I'll build a bigger army too. And then, and then that continues and continues and continues. Same with fucking bombs and atomic bombs and nuclear weapons. Sometimes just pushing through might not be the best That's the idea. Give us more examples of unilateral disarmament.
You're absolutely right. The escalation of competition or arms races is a classic systems trap. Unilateral disarmament can be a way to break that cycle. Beyond the business example, in international relations, examples include specific decisions by countries, such as Sweden's choice to significantly reduce its military presence after World War II, or some nations declaring nuclear-free zones without preconditions, hoping to inspire reciprocal actions. These are often seen as calculated risks to shift the entire paradigm of conflict avoidance.
The last question I have for Gemini is about leverage points used wrong.
That's an important aspect. Meadows discusses how leverage points can be misapplied, often with unintended consequences. Where do you think they are most commonly misused?
Okay. Anything else?
No, I think it's it was actually just in closing. I thought it was a pretty inspiring book in many ways because it highlights the importance of all the different factors that influence systems, but then also it really highlights that we do have an ability to change systems, and systems do change all the time. Because systems are constantly in flux. And if we just know where to sort of use the right leverage points, like, change is absolutely possible. It's not easy. It's fucking difficult, but it's possible. And that is, yeah, that's good.
I was thinking we should have a new feature for the end. Maybe both of us can summarize the book in a sentence, what we learned the most about it. I can start. But yeah, I enjoyed the book too. I think we did a good choice. If I had to summarize it in one sentence, try to view things from a macro perspective. Try to understand how individual elements influence each other. The interplay of those interconnections will show us the behavior of the system and can help us provide change.
Yeah, that's 3 sentences.
My math isn't that good.
Fucked. Next time I'll do 1 sentence. It's gonna make a good show there.
I think mine, to try and keep it as short as possible, but I think it's one of my key takeaways is good information wins. Yeah, good information is paramount to understanding systems, making changes to systems.
Fuck yeah, that's what I call one sentence. I'm gonna make a nice shirt out of that, just mocking me. Cool. Well, thanks for watching, guys. As for the author of the book, Professor Dr. Meadows, we'd love to have you on our podcast. And yeah,
really. I think it's a great book. Check it out. See you later.
woo, good job, bud.
Nice.